Welcome to this week's Retail Office Hours. My name is Corinne Waldow. I'm the Economic Development Director for the Boulder Chamber, and I want to thank you for attending today's program and learning the most up-to-date information on safer at home for your industry, particularly retail. We want to thank our partners at the local Boulder County Chambers and Economic Development Agencies for continually providing businesses with the resources they need, including these weekly webinars. Please post all your questions in the Q&A feature, and I'll ask them on your behalf. We will also be sending out a recording of this webinar along with other resources mentioned by Angel and Zach, either today or tomorrow. Now, please welcome Zach Swank with Boulder County Public Health.
Thanks, Corinne, and thanks to the Boulder Chamber for their partnership in continuing to produce these webinars, as well as the partnership of all of our Chambers of Commerce and economic partners across the county. Today, we're going to talk about the retail section, and we'll go over the updates to Safer at Home, resources to support you, and as always, we'll have time for your Q&A. So, timeline, last week, Boulder County extended our face covering order. Also, the state extended the Safer at Home order until June 1st. And quick note on that June 1st date, that is just the time when the state is going to provide, the next changes to the order. No one should have the expectation that, the order will go away at June 1st. We're going to be under some version of restrictions for quite some time. On May 25th, private campsites opened up again. Yesterday, restaurants opened up at 50% capacity. And on June 1st, we're looking forward to day camps and youth sport camps opening, as well as additional updates from the state on any changes to Safer at Home. But as I said, long term, we're going to be under some version of Safer at Home until we have a vaccine or treatment. The order will continue to evolve in these periodic updates, as one expires and the new one is put into place. But just want to set everyone's expectation that it will be months until we have a vaccine or treatment, and so it will be months that we will still continue to be under some version of Safer at Home. And as a friendly reminder, COVID-19 is still just as contagious as it always was. In order to avoid backsliding and having an increase in disease rates, we need to continue to stay home as much as possible, to limit our interactions with each other as much as possible, practice social distancing, and wear face coverings outside the residence. So speaking of face coverings, I want to thank you for your feedback. We had a great response to our face covering survey, and those responses informed our decision to extend the face covering order. So some of the results of that survey, in general, retailers and other businesses reported good physical distancing by customers, some even saying that it was happening nearly 100% of the time. But there's definitely room for improvement there, with your help on, signage and, putting one-way arrows down on your, in your aisles and all the steps you're taking to encourage your customers to keep physical distancing. We were happy to see that in general, the opinions of the business community is that the face covering order strikes the right balance between protecting public health and not being too onerous on businesses. So that was good feedback. And we were pleased to see that businesses report around 92% compliance with face covering by customers. And when you compare that to our nearby counties that have also looked at compliance rate but don't have face covering orders, you can see that we're doing much better here in Boulder County at 92% with our face covering order than Arapahoe, Adams, or Douglas County, who do not have face covering orders and are at 74, 84, and 77%. And that shows up as a contributing factor in the new cases per 1,000 people that we've seen in the last 2 weeks. You can see Boulder, Larimer, and Denver counties all have face covering orders, and particularly Boulder and Larimer have lower transmissions rates in the last 2 weeks than our nearby metro partners. And while that's certainly not all due specifically just to the face covering order, that's definitely a contributing factor. So just in summary, whenever you're outside your residence, bring a face covering. There are specific requirements for retail and other businesses, but in short, if you're not going to be able to maintain 6-foot distance at all times, you're going to need to have a face covering. There are also municipal orders, Erie, Superior, Louisville, and Lafayette all have their own face covering orders. And we are working on now finalizing a simple graphic and chart that outlines, which order is more restrictive and which one applies. It applies certainly to office-based businesses, retail. Whenever you're out and about and you're going to be coming in contact, or potentially, you're not 100% sure that you'll be able to, stay absolutely 6 feet away from everybody, you should have your face covering with you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Angel, who's the lead liaison for retail, and she'll take it from here.
Great, thank you, Zach, and thank you, Corinne, for hosting this retail session. So I know that there's a few people who haven't attended these before, so I will touch on things in a little bit more in-depth than what I would normally. So generally speaking, I'll go over curbside practices and I'll show you where the curbside checklist is. But an example of a curbside practice in retail would be either having a call ahead option where people can tell you what they would like, and you could pre-package it and then bring it out and do that transaction outside of the store. Or you could also do something similar to what we've seen like community cycles do, where they have customers really queuing up outside of the store, maintaining that 6-foot social distancing, and then somebody will come and greet them and ask them, take their dimensions, like ask them what kind of bike they're looking for, and then they'll go in and find a couple options and bring it out for them to try. And then after they try that, they would do like all of the sanitizing of the bikes afterwards. So those are just a couple examples of how you can do curbside. And safer at home for retail, you don't have to just limit it to curbside, but it is a best practice to continue as long as you can. That way people can maintain social distancing. Another issue that we've encountered over the weeks with this webinar series is cleaning and quarantining retail products. So after customers try on clothing, or if they're returning items, retailers can quarantine those items, especially the soft goods that can't easily be cleaned. They can quarantine those soft items for 7 days. And Corinne had mentioned a best practice that some of the retailers are doing, and that is basically keeping one of the dressing rooms dedicated to quarantining the items that have been touched, either through people trying them on or through returns. And just keep in mind that the Safer at Home does talk about how retailers can limit the number of returns that they get. So you can adopt a policy as a retailer to say that you're not going to accept certain returns that are too difficult to clean. Just one note on the quarantining retail items is that you want to make sure that items don't, the newly quarantined items don't touch the older quarantined items. That way you don't recontaminate those items. So if you have some clothes that were tried on 2 days ago, you don't want to go ahead and put the clothes that were tried on today on top of those, because then you'll have to quarantine that whole pile for 7 days starting today. And I will point out on our website where you can find that cleaning and quarantining retail products resource that we've developed. Another item that we've had questions about over the last couple of weeks is shopping hours for high-risk individuals. So high-risk individuals are people who are over 65 years old, maybe somebody who has a disability that makes them more vulnerable to COVID, pregnant women, and you are obliged to have in-store shopping hours for high-risk individuals. So if you look to what the grocery stores have been doing over the past couple months, usually they'll set 1 or 2 days aside in the morning, first thing in the morning, from like 9 to 10 or whatever hours you typically open. Just think about keeping the first hour, like 1 or 2 days a week, available for people who are high-risk individuals. Another common question that we have for retailers is capacity of separated spaces within a facility. So keep in mind that if you have a store that has perhaps a garden center and then a main shopping area, each of those areas need to be, you need to calculate the maximum capacity for each of those areas separately. For example, if you do have a garden center and your maximum capacity for the whole store is 200, if everybody wants to be in that garden center, then you're not going to be able to properly social distance. We have updated our social distancing calculator. It's not yet put on our website, but I do want to point it out. So in this original thought, we basically had 6 feet between each of the people. This really limited it to where people could not pass each other safely while still maintaining that 6-foot social distancing. So we've updated the calculator to where people would have 12 feet grid. So you can see in this example that if somebody is maintaining 6 feet, then somebody can pass them between, so really there's 12 feet between these two individuals, but that means that an additional person can pass by them safely without violating that social distancing. And I'll point out on our website like where this will live, like where it will be saved after we get it posted. There's some resources that I want to go to. So this is the CDPHE guidance, and I'll go to that one first. And this is for the Safer at Home retail. If you haven't checked this out, this was what went into effect earlier this month. And And it basically went into effect May 1st, and it talks about how retailers need to be at 50% capacity, and they need to be able to maintain 6-foot social distance. So if you haven't been open to date, what that means is if 50% capacity isn't low enough for everybody within your store to maintain 6 feet, then you need to reduce the number of people who can go into your establishment. So an example of this would be that like if, and that 6-foot social distance is that, that grid that I just showed you last time. But this goes over everything that you need to do for it to keep your employees safe, and basically all the plexiglass, installing plexiglass at the registers. Additionally, one thing that I didn't bring up during curbside is I know that as restaurants are opening and there's potentially going to be more activity on the streets, some retailers are interested in perhaps setting up more of a permanent retail shop on the street. We do want to say that our curbside guidance doesn't necessarily require plexiglass screens at the register, but if you are setting up a register on the street for your retail establishment, then you should have plexiglass because that's a little bit more permanent procedure or process where you're going to be exposing your employees to more COVID viruses potentially. So this is the CDPHE one. And then I will go back to the presentation. The Boulder County Public Health guidance can be found at boco.org COVID-19 business. And on that, we do have a variety of guidance in here. Let me see really quickly. So it's actually under this accordion tab right here where it's guidance for Boulder County Safer at Home. And under this, you will find a checklist specifically for retail. So our section right here is at the bottom of this list. And this will basically talk to you about all of the requirements under the Safer at Home order. And then also we have best practices listed at the bottom. So if you're new and you haven't opened up your shop to date, this would be a wonderful resource for you to be able to go through and make sure that you're following the best practices. Also, keep in mind that throughout this, it references signage and what signs you should have. I didn't put this in the PowerPoint presentation, but the Chamber has developed a bunch of signs that they will likely send out an email after this to where you don't have to create your own social distancing signs. You don't have to create your own mask signs to tell people that they need to wear masks before they come into your store. So you can just go to that, it's a Google share file, and you can download the printed copies of the flyers that you need. So this will be, it also links to like printable CDC signs as well. Another resource that I want to point out is as restaurants are moving outside, this Tuesday, the Chamber, they hosted a right-of-way process webinar with the City of Boulder that talks about restaurants moving outside, but they do touch on a couple of items with retail potentially. And just keep in mind when you're talking about restaurants opening and them moving outside to that being outside, they're going to have to go through a permitting process, and that really is the municipal level. So that's not something that Boulder County Public Health dictates, that right-of-way use. That's really something that you're going to have to turn to your local municipality to get guidance on how to use those spaces. So again, here's Boulder County's guidances and tools. Some of them that I'd like to point out for you all, if you haven't seen them to date, is ADA guidance for employee health information. So part of that checklist does talk about symptom screening as your employees come into work. And this is a good guide just to tell you like what you can share with other people on the team if somebody does test positive or if somebody is symptomatic with COVID. Also, here's that cleaning and quarantine retail products link that I talked about. And this talks a little bit more about like the science behind why we talk about quarantining the items for 7 days. There are a lot of people or a lot of organizations that perhaps are trying to make money during this time with sanitizing equipment and different practices. And while some of them may work, really we think that the cheapest and the best way to effectively quarantine the items is to do it for 7 days versus buying expensive UV systems or trying to steam the clothing. So 7 days really is what we're providing guidance on. Additionally, I'll go into this a little bit more, but there's a COVID-19 outbreak guidance for businesses. So just keep in mind that if you have 2 or more people who are positive, test positive for COVID, there are automatic public health procedures that you need to follow. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what those are here in a minute. Also, this is something that a lot of retailers want information about. There's a sample face covering script for businesses. We understand that a lot of you are really worried about people coming into your establishments without a mask. You're afraid that it might potentially scare off other business. We did develop this script so that you can really practice how to talk to customers about it instead of escalating the situation. I know that a lot of people are just getting fatigued with the current situation, and sometimes you've heard about like potential conflicts in the news, but we really have tried to take a de-escalation approach and really come from a point of curiosity when you're confronting people about not wearing a mask. Just keeping in mind that if they do have a medical condition that they don't have to wear a mask, and you don't have the right as an establishment to demand what that medical condition is that prohibits them from wearing a mask. So this is the social distancing calculator, the space calculator that I talked about. It's an Excel file that you'll download. This, the one that's currently on our website is actually the old one that will be updated sometime within the next day or so. And then there's also links to the past sessions that we've had that goes into a little bit more depth on different items. So going back to that, the outbreaks definition. So again, I will click on the CDPHE outbreak report form and bring that up for you to see. This is, it walks you through like what to do if you have somebody who has been confirmed of having COVID-19, and then also if you have suspected COVID-19. So the suspected COVID-19 would be people who have some of the symptoms of COVID-19 but haven't been tested yet. And you would walk through this procedure, and you would inform CDPHE that you have an outbreak and inform Boulder County Public Health so that we can help you kind of do some of that contact tracing, see who on the workplace has been exposed, and really help you protect the rest of your employees from contracting COVID. And again, we will work with you. We have an epidemiology team that will work with you to see like what measures you need to take into place in order to prevent further spread. So I know I've said this on previous sessions, but Boulder County Public Health can't provide legal advice. but you are obliged to comply with all of the safer at home requirements for retail establishments. And if you have other aspects of your business, like if you have a back office, you should look at the office requirements. And if you are maybe a hybrid company that has some of the personal services, like some of the personal services, like a barber shop and also retail, then you should check out the personal services requirements as well. We're here to support you. We have been creating resources based on what you all see as gaps in the guidance that you've received from CDPHE. So we're here to provide general guidance, but as far as getting into the details of what your specific business needs, we don't necessarily have the capacity to do that, and you should really contact your own attorney to see how it directly applies to your specifics in your business. So where to go for more information? I've already pointed at some of these out. The Boulder County COVID-19 business page. Also, there's the energizecolorado.com, which is the marketplace. We understand that it's been challenging for many businesses to get a hold of enough PPE. So this Energize Marketplace is finally open. I think it opened last Tuesday. So you can go look there if you're having a hard time tracking down masks and gloves and hand sanitizer. The Chambers of Commerce have been amazing partners in this. Also your city, I want to point out, like the city agencies that are helping with the right-of-way permitting, they're going to be great resources as well. So again, I had alluded to how there's different industries. Here's kind of an overview of when they are available. So some of the businesses might be a combination of like food service and also retail or something along those lines. So if you are wondering which of these businesses, which of these sectors that you really fall into, you can reach out and we can provide some guidance on that. But you can also go and look at some of the recorded sessions to see if it pertains to how you're set up. Another thing that I would like to point out is that we are conducting weekly Spanish language sessions with the Latino Chamber, and they are covering a lot of these same industries, a little bit broader in scope, but it's a great resource. They're also recorded and available. So we have changed our hours of our call center and our email. I do want to let you know that this COVID Biz email is available. If you have questions that we can answer, then you can send us an email. We also have a call center that people can leave a message or talk to somebody and leave a message for our business liaison team. This is the same call center that members of the public or employees call if they have complaints that they want to make against a particular business. So we do also kind of reach out to businesses who we've heard complaints about and follow up to see if they're following the checklist. So that's all I have, Corinne. I don't know if you have any additional items that had come up in the right-of-way discussion that you had on Tuesday with the City of Boulder.
No, I think those are pretty, if you do have questions about that, you need, like she said, talk to your municipality. I can point you to a common email address within City of Boulder, and actually one of the people is on the phone call today to get some of your questions answered about the right-of-way applications, the extension into the sidewalks and so forth. I know that other municipalities like Longmont, Louisville, and all of them are looking at ways to expand space due to some social distancing. We do have a question about gloves. Where are we with the requirement for gloved employees who have customer interactions? Are gloves still required?
So yes, I will go ahead and bring up that that checklist. Let me bring up that checklist.
And just to point out, I answer this question a lot. On the checklist where it says requirement, those are the legal obligations to follow. The best practices are to increase the health and safety of your customers, your employees, and so forth.
Yes. So this is the retail guidance here. And it does say that anybody who interacts with, it does say that for workplace requirements to be open, that you must provide face coverings, masks, and gloves for your employees. And then also you have to provide gloves, and so it's underneath the employee related. it says that you must wear gloves, face coverings, or masks during customer interactions whenever possible. So also it does talk about when you're managing returns. So if you're taking returns from customers, you need to wear gloves and PPE as well. So again, yeah, as Corinne had said, these headers here, the requirements, are things that you have to do in order to be open.
We can't see your screen right now, actually.
Oh well, I'm sorry. I thought that I shared the whole screen. Can you see it now?
You stopped sharing, and then we can see you though.
Oh, well, that's not what you want to look at. Okay. Sorry about that. So I think that it's because I also got out of the presentation. So, sorry, okay. So the retail checklist here. So it did talk about, I just basically did a search for gloves. And it does say that provide face covering, that the retailer has to provide face coverings and gloves for their employees. And then you go down to the employee requirements. It does say that you must wear gloves and face covering during all customer interactions. And then they do talk about it does talk about how you need to wear face covering and gloves for all activities when you are interacting, all work activities, sorry. And then also it says whenever you're doing, that you have to wear PPE when you're managing deliveries and returns. So it's in there quite a bit. And as Corinne had said, if it's a requirement, it's a requirement. If you go down to the bottom here, we do have best practices. These are additional resources and guidelines.
So speaking of gloves, we had a request actually with all the signage. So again, the signage is for you to use. I will send it out again, but the signage allows you to create a little bit of a distance between your company and the requirements. So it's the signage you're going to see at other restaurants, manufacturers, office, retailers, and it says mask required when enter, or social distancing, or wash your hands. We added one this week as of today on the CDC, kind of a visual poster that looks like all the others on how to remove gloves properly, because that's one question we get a lot, is safe use of PPE. So there's one on how to wear a mask and one on how to remove gloves, and includes all the hand washing and so forth. Please use those. They're in Spanish and in English, so you don't have to do the interpretation yourself either.
And I will say with the signage, sometimes we will receive complaints from members of the public, and they'll talk about an establishment. They'll say that they had the signs up, but it's not being enforced. So we understand that with all of these signs that sometimes customers aren't reading everything, and that can be really frustrating for you. So think about multiple communication ways whenever you're talking to people. So maybe posting somebody at the front of the store when they're coming, just kind of greeting, say, oh, just a reminder, maintain 6-foot social distance in our store. Or if you are a larger establishment and you have a PA system, just have a recording that plays in your store reminding people to maintain that social distance and to wear the mask. I know that it's frustrating for you when the customers come in and they're not paying attention to the signs that you've posted, but we can just try to communicate it in various ways.
We've also heard that while people are abiding by the mask inside, the perception of some of the people walking around outside retailers without masks make it so that some people don't even want to enter the retailers because they're worried. But a lot of retailers are following the rules and trying to make sure that they're safe environments for their customers and employees.
Yeah, and I mean, one recommendation that I've seen is perhaps really boosting your social media, just taking pictures of people inside of your stores and just showing people that you are following the social distancing requirements, and really communicating that to people who might be a little bit wary of going out and exposing themselves. So I just think of all the communication avenues that you have to just really tell your customers that you're taking this seriously.
Okay. So you talked a little bit about contact tracing. With the new restaurant requirements that came out this week, there were some recommendations on things like taking reservations in order to assist with contact tracing at a future date. What are some I mean, should retailers, make note of people that come into their store for longer than a certain amount of time to assist with that, or is that just not something that retailers need to think about?
Well, we have, I have seen guidance on perhaps scheduling appointments for people to come in and shop. Like if you have a smaller store and you want to make sure that it's a more personalized experience. Obviously, the details of each retail establishment are going to be different, and you may not be able to do that. But whenever you can limit the flow of people who are in the store and really show people that you are adhering to the social distancing, it's going to be better. So if you did do something like that, where you would schedule shopping hours for particular people or do appointments by appointments, you would have a record of who came for that particular appointment. But there's no requirement that I'm aware of. Zach, maybe you know, but there's no requirement for retailers to keep a list of people who frequent their establishment.
We could get Zach back on camera because I think he'll need to be on camera for the next question. Yeah. So you can answer that one, and then I'll ask the next question.
Sure. Yeah, Angel's correct. It would be best practice, but no requirement.
We have a question. When does the next phase for retailers start and end?
Yeah, so this gets back to what I was talking about safer at home currently expiring on June 1st. So even the term expiring, which is technically true, is probably not the right term to use. We are going to be under safer at home again until we have a vaccine or treatment. So, or some version thereof, it might come under a different name, but certainly we're going to need to continue to have protocols in place to prevent the spread of COVID-19. I think what's different about, this pandemic versus other natural disasters that we've been familiar with, fires or floods, is they have a specific, event end date, right? And then things just get progressively better from there. The rain stops, or the fire becomes 100% contained. This pandemic's a little bit different in that the threat doesn't go away until we have a vaccine or treatment, and so will continue to need to practice social distancing, avoid large gatherings, etc., until that happens. So. June 1st is technically when the current order will be, I will say, changed rather than expires. And then we would expect to see some updates and changes to that order. We do not yet know if there'll be any changes that affect retail. But that's when we would expect the governor to announce, what will be the status for most of June, if not all of June. And then, that order is going to have an end date. And when that order ends, there'll be another one in its place. Again, until we have vaccine or treatment, we're going to be under some level of restrictions on our activities in order to prevent, a massive increase of cases again. And the thing that we all want to avoid is, having to go back to a stay-at-home order, right? That could potentially happen if, if we aren't able to continue to follow the protocols and practice these good practices that keep the transmission rates down. So it's critical that we brace ourselves for the long haul here and continue to follow these practices.
So, just to put it in perspective, there are certain industries that still haven't opened yet, and everybody, no matter what industry you are, you're working at a limited capacity, correct?
Yes.
So we know fitness centers, and so there's going to be evolutions of this into the future. And as we I think, Zach, in the past, you talked a little bit about how it takes, a full 2 weeks to know the effects of possibly something that happened, or an order change or something to that effect, because of the incubation period.
Yeah, then thanks for raising that, Corinne. That's a really great point. And that's part of the the frustration and delay that, I have, you have, we all have around, not knowing the future is that whenever there's a change that takes place, say, yesterday, folks can start going back to restaurants. Well, not every restaurant opened yesterday because, they weren't able to because they didn't have the procedures in place yet, or because they chose not to. So then there's that lag, and then the customers need to come back. And then, so let's say in a week, restaurants are largely open out and operating and they've got customers. So that's the start of when we're starting to have those new different interactions. So let's say that happens next week. Then it takes 2 more weeks because of the incubation period of COVID-19 to find out, really what transmission happened, next week. So now we're 3 weeks out before we find out what was the impact of opening restaurants with these restrictions, and did it have a real detrimental impact on the rates of transmission. And so that's why we have these generally long delays and difficulty predicting the future of what's coming next, is because we've got at least really 3 weeks, 1 week for the change to happen out there in the community and for people to change their behavior patterns, and then 2 weeks for the incubation period for us to find out what level of transmission that results in the community. And so that's part of the frustration of about all this, is that just that delay in getting that information, and we can't make decisions about further loosening restrictions until we understand what the impact of the last decision was. And then once we know that impact, then we want to move quickly, right? And we don't want to delay another day. And then that's creates another challenging situation, say for the restaurants with this last order. The guidance came out just a day or two before they were allowed to be open, which doesn't give them very much time to plan. But the trade-off there is, there's a long delay until we get the information, but once you get the information, you want to act on it as quickly as possible, because we all know, that our economy, our livelihoods, our jobs are at stake here. And so we don't want to cause additional delay. So there's this tension of a sort of like it's definitely a hurry up and wait, scenario, or wait, then hurry up scenario. And I know how frustrating that can be.
Yeah. So that's about the state guidance. When will Boulder County be looking again at its mask order and reassessing future extensions of that potentially?
So our current order goes through June, the end of June. So we would be looking at it again, shortly before the end of June. We may likely ask for you to contribute to a survey again, particularly, the folks on this webinar and the retail sector is really critical information for us about the behavior of customers. So look towards the end of June for additional communications and requests from feedback from us about the face covering order. And we should also note again that, that's for Boulder County. Then of course, Erie, Superior, Louisville, Lafayette all have their own face covering orders as well.
Great. And again, face coverings doesn't mean a surgical mask. I think it was described very well earlier that it needs to be some sort of cloth that covers your mouth and nose, and make sure that you're saving those surgical masks for our healthcare providers. Do we have any more questions out there? Check it out. We do have some individuals that called in, so you may not be able to do the Q&A. If you called in and you're not getting your question answered, please feel free to email me or email the COVID biz at Boulder County. Again, thank you for continually getting the information you need to safely reopen your business. Each week we're learning about, there may be like restaurants this week. There may be additional, tempered reopens for some other industries in the future. Come back to us, ask the questions, make sure that you have the information you need to keep both your employees and your customers safe. We're here for you, whether it's the chambers, economic development agencies, cities, as well as the county. In the right-of-way discussions, just remember that that's not county and that they would force you back into the municipalities to answer some of those questions. So I might be able to help direct you in those cases as well. We will see you next week, and we hope everybody has a pleasant afternoon and a great weekend. Thank you.